Hey guys, for today's video, I'll be going over the new Luna 2 V1 Beta Nefer leak. Before going over the leaks, I'd like to remind y'all that this information is subject to change until the last beta of Luna 2, so take everything with a grain of salt. Anyways, starting off with Nefer's kit, it seems like for Nefer, her skill, enhanced charge attack, and ultimate, aka her main sources of damage, will be dealing damage that scales off of a mixture of EM and attack. So, artifact sets like the Gilded Dream set or the new Night of the Unveiling set will be good for her. For her basic attacks, they don't really do anything other than just apply Dendro. For her charge attack, she enters the Slither state and moves rapidly for a brief period of time before exiting the state and dealing Dendro damage, which is another decent option for exploration in Notcry. Additionally, it states that unleashing her elemental skill or sprinting while Nefer is in the Slither state will not cause her to exit the state, which doesn't really make sense to me, but I'm assuming all this means is that she won't exit the Slither state if she is using her skill. Speaking of her skill states that Nefer charges forward, dealing AoE Dendro damage and entering the Shadow Dance state. While in the Shadow Dance state, if you have at least one Verdant Dew, Nefer's charge attacks will be replaced with the special charge attack Phantom Performance. Now, if you're familiar with Verdant Dew stacks, then you already know that Verdant Dew stacks are used by Lauma to convert them into other stacks that buff bloom reaction damage. But if you're not familiar with these stacks, well, the shortest explanation is that Verdant Dew stacks are stacks obtainable after causing the Lunar Bloom reaction every 2.5 seconds, which as of right now, only Lauma and Nefer can enable the ability to trigger the Lunar Bloom reaction for a team. Anyways, for her Phantom Performance, aka her enhanced charge attack, Nefer consumes one Verdant Dew stack and does coordinated attacks with shades that deal 2 and 3 stages of AoE Dendro damage respectively that are considered as Lunar Bloom damage for up to 3 times. Here is where you can see the main focus of her kit, since her entire kit revolves around doing these 3 charge attacks because they do a substantial amount of Lunar Bloom damage that, as of right now, is giving Nefer the 3rd highest DPS in the game. Now, before going into her ultimate, I'd like to go into her passives first because they give a ton of context for what the ultimate does. For her first passive, Nefer will be granted the corresponding buff effects based on the party's moon sign, which, if you didn't know already, the party's moon sign can be leveled up to 2 times depending on how many Notcry characters are on the team. If you have 1 Notcry character, you raise it to the Nascent Gleam level, and if you have 2 Notcry characters, you raise it to the Ascendant Gleam level. Anyways, if the moon sign is of the Ascendant Gleam level, when Nefer unleashes her elemental skill, any Dendro cores and Bountiful cores from Nailu on the field will be converted to Seeds of the Seeds, and any Lunar Bloom reactions triggered in the following 15 seconds that would create Dendro cores or Bountiful cores will instead create Seeds of the Seeds, meaning that instead of being able to cause the Burgeon, Hyper Bloom, or just regular Bloom explosions, the Dendro cores you spawned won't actually do any damage, and you'll simply be giving Nefer more Seeds of the Seeds, which are their own unique looking Bloom cores that, again, don't do any damage. It also states that when Nefer unleashes a charge attack or an enhanced charge attack, she can absorb Seeds of the Seeds within a certain range, gaining 1 stack of Veil of Falsehood for every seed absorbed. When this effect gains 3 stacks, or when the 3rd stack's duration is refreshed, Nefer's elemental mastery will be increased by 100 for 8 seconds, and each stack of Veil of Falsehood increases the damage dealt by Nefer's Phantom Performance, aka her enhanced charge attack, by 10% with the initial maximum number, aka her maximum number of obtainable stacks at C0 being 3, with each stack lasting for 9 seconds, meaning that if you want to maximize your DPS, you're gonna want to use your charge attacks once you've already created a ton of blooms, aka Seed of the Seeds, rather than just spamming all 3 of her charge attacks at the same time so that you can collect your Seed of the Seeds to gain a nice EM boost and damage boost. For her other passive, it's a standard Notcry passive at this point, since it's pretty similar to Flint's or Inefas's passive that increase attack based on their EM, but this time the stats are switched, meaning that instead of building Nefer with attack so that you can get more EM, you're gonna want to build her with more EM so that you can get more attack, since her passive states that each point of Nefer's elemental mastery beyond 500 will increase her attack by 0.4 for a maximum of what I'm assuming to be 200 basic attack, meaning that you're gonna want 1000 EM on Nefer to get 200 additional basic attack, which is a really good amount of attack since most characters' basic attack, aka the attack stat without any weapon attack percentages or artifacts attack stats affecting it, is only around 1000. For her other passive, it's also another standard Notcry passive, since it's the same passive as Laumas' Lunar Bloom passive. It states that when a party member triggers a bloom reaction, it'll be converted into the Lunar Bloom reaction, with every point of elemental mastery that Nefer has, increasing Lunar Bloom's base damage by 0.0175% up to a maximum of 14%. Additionally, when Nefer is in the party's moon sign will be increased by 1 level. This passive is really only good for her, since she's the only character who does a substantial amount of Lunar Bloom damage, other than C6 Lauma, who already has this passive. So this passive is really only good in case you're not running Lauma, so that you can actually activate everything in her kits. Anyways, now that we're done with the passives, for her ultimate, it states that Nefer deals AoE dendro damage, and will consume all Veils of Falsehood to increase the damage dealt by the current elemental burst by 40% per each stack, up to 120%, meaning that you're gonna want to use this ultimate right after you finish using her skill, since the Veils of Falsehood stacks that enhance this ultimate's damage substantially are only obtainable after converting the Seeds of Deceits, which are only obtainable during her skill. Now, for Nefer's signature weapon, it states that the user's crit rate is increased by 8%, and when the equipping character unleashes an elemental skill, they gain the Secret of Lies effect, which increases elemental mastery by 80 for 12 seconds. Also, when the equipping character deals Lunar Bloom damage to opponents, they gain the Moon of Truth effect, which increases crit damage by 24% for 4 seconds. And when both the Secret of Lies and the Moon of Truth effects are active at the same time, the results of both effects will be increased by 50%. And this weapon has an 88% crit damage main stats, meaning that if used on Nefer, or any unit that does Lunar Bloom damage, which as of right now is only Nefer and Lauma, the user can gain up to 124% more crit damage, 8% crit rate, and 120 elemental mastery, which is decent for any Catalyst character that requires EM or crit stats like Varisa, Risley, Molani, Nahida, etc., since it provides 104% crit stats and 80 elemental mastery. Another good thing about this weapon is that it synergizes really well with the new Notcry sets, since it provides a ton of crit rate that evens out with the absolutely insane amount of crit damage that this weapon provides. For her Constellations, her C1 states that the base damage for Lunar Bloom reactions caused by Nefer's Phantom Performance, aka her enhanced charge attack, is increased by 60% of her elemental mastery, and this effect is also boosted by Veil of Falsehood. This constellation is going to increase her damage by 16%. For her C2, it states that it extends Veil of Falsehood's duration by 5 seconds and increases its stack limit to 5, as well as causing Phantom Performance to deal up to 150% of its original damage. And when Nefer unleashes her elemental skill, she will instantly gain 2 stacks of Veil of Falsehood. Additionally, when Veil of Falsehood gains 5 stacks, or when the 5th stack's duration is refreshed, Nefer's elemental mastery will be increased by 200 for 8 seconds instead. This constellation is a massive damage boost, since not only does it increase the Veil stack's cap by 66%, and thus provide you with a 20% damage boost, but it also increases your EM boost by another 100 elemental mastery, and it increases the original damage, aka the final damage you will do after all of your buffs have been calced, for her charge attacks, aka her main source of damage, by 150%. Thus, her DPS will also be increased by around 16%, similarly to her C1. For her C4, it states that when Nefer is on the field and in the Shadow Dance state, you will gain Verdant Dew 25% faster, meaning that instead of getting Verdant Dews every 2.5 seconds, you'll get them in 1.9 seconds, which isn't too insane of a DPS increase. Additionally, while Nefer is in the Shadow Dance state, nearby opponents will have their Dendro Res decreased by 20%, in where this effect will be removed when Nefer exits the Shadow Dance states, or after she strays a certain distance away from opponents for 4.5 seconds. This Dendro Shred also isn't that big of a DPS increase, since all it does is just allow Lauma to use the new Notcry support sets rather than the Deep Wood memory sets. But even then, that also isn't too big of a DPS increase, since all the new set does is provide 120 EM and a measly 10% damage boost to Lunar Bloom damage. For her C6, it states that when Nefer unleashes Phantom Performance, aka her enhanced charge attack, the second stage of damage dealt by herself will be converted to deal AoE dendro damage equal to 85% of her elemental mastery that is considered as Lunar Bloom damage. Additionally, when the attacks from Phantom Performance end, an extra instance of AoE dendro damage equal to 120% of Nefer's elemental mastery will be dealt that is considered as Lunar Bloom damage. Additionally, when the moon sign is of the Ascendant Gleam level, Nefer's Lunar Bloom damage is elevated elevated by 15%, which is a damage boost independent of other damage boosts. This constellation is also incredibly powerful, since it gives her AoE capabilities, and it increases her damage by a substantial amount, since the damage boost that is independent of other damage boosts is incredibly undiluted. Anyways, for my first impressions on Nefer, it seems to me like Nefer is going to be insanely powerful, since her DPS is calculated to be the third highest DPS in the game, but similarly to Flynn's and Skirk, her DPS is going to drop significantly without her dedicated supports, aka Lauma, to the point to where she'll arguably not even be viable for most players, meaning that if you want her performance to be meta, or even just viable, you're also gonna have to invest into Lauma. Also, it seems to me like she's a very unique Dendro character, since she won't synergize with a lot of typically good Dendro reaction supports. For example, because the majority of her damage comes from her Lunar Bloom charge attacks rather than from your typical Bloom reactions, this means that Hydra application isn't going to be as crucial as sub DPS, meaning that Xingqiu isn't going to do as much as characters like Furina and especially Aino, since their Hydra application doesn't activate with coordinated attacks with normal attacks, and he won't do as much as Yelan, because even though Yelan's Hydra application isn't as good as Xingqiu, with Nefer, Hydra application doesn't matter as much as sub DPS, which Yelan does way more than Xingqiu. Also, it seems like because you can't actually trigger Burgeon or regular Bloom explosions, you won't take any damage from the Bloom reactions, meaning that Baishu's Dendro application is going to be significantly reduced, since the majority of his Dendro application comes from when his really low HP shields are destroyed by the damage done to them by Bloom reactions. Also, when it comes to whether she synergizes with Nailu or not, well, she doesn't, especially if there are two Notcry characters on the team, since if there are, that's when Nailu's bountiful cores won't explode, and her entire value goes down the drain. Now, if there aren't two Notcry characters on the team, Nailu's bountiful cores will be able to do damage, but Nefer's DPS will significantly drop, and both of them will just act as a waste of a slot for each other, meaning that they won't synergize whatsoever together, even without two Notcry characters. So, similarly to Flynn's, I would only recommend summoning on her if you really like her character, or if you can invest into her teams, since she's going to do a ton of damage with the right investments. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to share anything in the comments below, I would greatly appreciate it. Goodbye.